A single father was tricked into a blind date with a girl in a wheelchair who seemed materialistic. But what she said left him in tears and changed their lives forever. A story that will touch your heart. Subscribe, leave a like, and comment where you're watching from. The deafening noise of the downtown mall echoed through the corridors as David Miller nervously adjusted the collar of his navy polo shirt. His hands were sweating as he checked his phone for the 10th time in 5 minutes. 7:45 p.m., still 15 minutes to go before the date his sister, Sarah, had insisted he accept. "David, you need to get out there, man. It's been 2 years since Emily left you. Isabella needs to see her dad happy." Sarah's words echoed in his mind as he headed to the Olive Garden on the second floor of the mall. David was a 34-year-old successful civil engineer with neatly styled brown hair and eyes that carried a subtle melancholy. His stubbled beard hinted at the tough days he'd been facing since becoming a single father. The restaurant was bustling that Friday night. Families occupied the larger tables, young couples shared desserts, and David felt like a fish out of water. He had always been more reserved, preferring the construction sites he managed to social events. He chose a table near the entrance, as agreed, and ordered a beer to calm his nerves. "Excuse me, are you David?" The feminine voice made him look up immediately. Before him was a young woman of about 28, with wavy blonde hair cascading gracefully over her shoulders, expressive green eyes, and a smile that lit up her entire face. She wore a floral dress in shades of blue and white that perfectly matched her tanned skin. What caught David's attention the most, however, was the motorized wheelchair she was sitting in. "Yes, that's me. You must be Melissa," David replied, quickly standing up and feeling a mix of surprise and embarrassment. Sarah hadn't mentioned that the girl had any physical limitations. "Please, have a seat. He stammered, realizing his gaffe. Melissa laughed naturally, a crystal-clear laugh that broke the tense atmosphere. "Relax, David. I'm already seated," she joked, positioning herself at the table with precise and confident movements. "Your sister told me a lot about you. I heard you're working on the new commercial building downtown. What an incredible project." David's first feeling was relief. She seemed comfortable with the situation. The second was curiosity. How did she know about the downtown project? It was a confidential job, still in the early planning stages. "Did Sarah tell you about that?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Actually, I have a friend who works in the city's planning department. They mentioned a very talented engineer who was revolutionizing sustainability concepts in commercial projects," Melissa replied, her eyes shining with genuine interest. "It must be very rewarding to see your ideas take shape in concrete." David felt his chest swell with pride. It had been a long time since someone had shown real interest in his work. Emily always complained that he talked too much about engineering, and after the divorce, their conversations had been limited to technical meetings and basic needs for their daughter. "It really is rewarding," he agreed, relaxing in his chair, "especially when we can implement solutions that truly make a difference for the environment. We're using a rainwater harvesting system that can reduce building consumption by 40%. Melissa leaned slightly forward, showing interest. "That's fascinating, and I imagine it's quite profitable as well. A project of that scale must yield a considerable commission, right?" The question sounded strange, but David attributed it to natural curiosity. "Well, I can't go into details about figures, but yes, it's an important project for my career," he replied diplomatically. During the conversation, Melissa demonstrated knowledge about various topics, movies, literature, even about the school where David had mentioned his daughter studied. "St. Marcelina Academy has an excellent reputation. It must be expensive to maintain such a quality education," she commented casually. "How do you know where Isabella studies?" David asked, slightly furrowing his brow. Oh, your sister mentioned it. She cares a lot about her niece's education, Melissa replied quickly, but David noticed a brief hesitation in her voice. Dinner continued with Melissa suggesting expensive dishes from the menu: grilled salmon, imported wines, special dessert. You don't mind, do you? I rarely have the opportunity to try such nice things, she justified with a smile that mixed shyness and mischief. David, touched by her supposed vulnerability, simply smiled and waved to the waiter. Of course not. The night is yours. While waiting for dessert, Melissa shared her story. She was born in Austin, moved to San Francisco at 20 to study theater, dreaming of becoming an actress. The accident that resulted in her spinal injury had happened 3 years earlier in a hit-and-run on I-35. It was hard to accept the new reality, she said, lowering her eyes dramatically. But I learned that life goes on, even when everything seems lost. David felt his heart tighten. His own life had turned upside down when Emily left him, taking only her clothes and leaving a cold letter explaining that she wasn't ready to be a mother. He understood the pain of loss, the need to rebuild dreams. You are very strong, he murmured, gently touching her hand across the table. I admire your courage. Melissa's green eyes filled with tears. Thank you, David. It's been a long time since I met someone who really understands me. When the bill arrived, $70, David paid without hesitation. Melissa offered to split it, but he categorically refused. No way. It was a pleasure to meet you. As they left the mall, she asked him to accompany her to the adapted taxi stand. My car is in the shop, she explained. These special vehicles always have problems. I can give you a ride, he offered. David. That's very kind, but I live quite far in the suburb. It would be too much trouble for you. David insisted, but she was firm in her refusal. Next time, she said, kissing his cheek tenderly. Because there will be a next time, right? As he drove back home, David felt lighter than he had in months. Melissa was smart, beautiful, and interesting. The fact that she was in a wheelchair did not diminish her attractiveness at all. In fact, it awakened in him a protective instinct that had long been dormant. Upon arriving home, he found Emily watching cartoons in the living room, still in her pajamas. At 8 years old, the girl had inherited her father's brown hair and her mother's determined personality. Dad, how was the date? She asked with the typical curiosity of her age. It was good, sweetheart. I met a nice person, he replied, sitting down next to her on the couch. Is she pretty? Very pretty. Is she going to be my new mom? Emily's direct question caught David off guard. Easy there, princess. I barely know her yet. It's just possibilities. Emily made a face. I don't want a new mum. It's just fine with the two of us. David hugged his daughter, feeling the weight of responsibility. How could he balance his own need for companionship with the emotional stability that Emily needed? For 2 years, he had poured all his energy into raising her, sacrificing his personal life. Now, for the first time, he glimpsed the possibility of finding someone who understood his circumstances, someone who also knew the pain of loss and rebuilding. That night, as he tucked Emily in, she asked a question that would echo in his mind. Dad, if you really like her, will you leave me like Mom did? Never, my love. Never, he promised, kissing his daughter's forehead. But while David dreamed of romantic possibilities, he had no idea that on the other side of the city, Melissa was calmly removing her leg braces and storing her wheelchair in the closet of her luxurious apartment in the Upper East Side. David's apartment in the Upper East Side woke up to the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the familiar sound of the TV on the children's channel. It was Saturday morning, and Emily had been up for an hour, eager to know more details about the girl her dad had met the night before. Dad, are you going to see her again? She asked while chewing on a slice of bread with cream cheese. her brown eyes fixed on her father, who was preparing his coffee. David smiled, still feeling a flutter in his stomach at the thought of Melissa's smile. "Maybe, Princess, if she wants to, of course." "But did you like her?" His daughter's direct question made him reflect. Yes, he had liked her, much more than he expected. Melissa had something that attracted him beyond her obvious beauty, a vulnerability that touched directly on his protective instinct, combined with a sharp intelligence that made the conversation interesting. And there was something more. She really seemed to understand him, knowing his likes and interests in a way that even Jessica hadn't shown during their 5-year relationship. His phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Melissa. "Good morning, David. I woke up thinking about our conversation yesterday. How about we have lunch today? I know a special place." David's heart raced. She was interested. He quickly typed a response. "Good morning. I would love to have lunch with you. Where?" The reply came almost immediately. "How about the Sky Room? I've always dreamed of going there, but never had the chance. Would you mind? I know it's a bit pricey, but I promise it's worth it." David hesitated for a moment. The Sky Room was indeed expensive. Lunch there would easily cost $40 per person. But the excitement in Melissa's message touched him. How many times had he himself skipped special things because of money? And she had been through so much. "Perfect. Shall we meet?" "At 1 p.m., he replied. "Emily, Daddy is going out for lunch today, okay? I'm going to ask Aunt Sarah to come stay with you." The girl made a face. "With the girl in the wheelchair? Her name is Melissa. And yes, with her. Why can't she come here? That way I can get to know her better." Emily's suggestion was logical, but David remembered Melissa's concern about accessibility. His apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building without an elevator. It would be impossible for her to come up. "The building doesn't have an elevator, sweetheart. It would be difficult for her." "Oh." Emily seemed to process the information. It must be boring not being able to go to many places. His daughter's innocent observation made David reflect on the limitations that Melissa faced daily. How difficult it must be to navigate a city like New York, which was not well prepared for people with disabilities. An hour later, Sarah arrived at the apartment with her usual protective big sister demeanor. At 38 years old, a successful lawyer, she had taken on an almost maternal role towards David since the divorce. "So, how was it yesterday?" she asked, sitting down in the kitchen while David adjusted the grey dress shirt he had chosen for lunch. "It was surprising," David admitted. "You didn't tell me she had a disability." Sarah frowned. "What disability?" "She uses a wheelchair, Sarah. How did you not mention that?" "David, I don't know any Melissa in a wheelchair. The Melissa I was going to introduce you to works in my office, walks normally, and couldn't go yesterday because she had a family emergency." David's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "You mean you met someone completely unknown? David, that's dangerous. How did she—" "I'd know you would be there." The pieces began to fall into place in a disturbing way. The specific information about his job, about Emily's school, the detailed knowledge about his likes. How was that possible? "Sarah, did you post something on social media about the meeting?" "I just mentioned on Facebook that I was trying to set up a date for my brother. I didn't give specific details, but—" Sarah paused, opening her phone. "Let me check. David, I posted in the group Moms of St. Marcelina. I mentioned I had a single brother, an engineer, father of Emily." David's stomach churned. "How many people have access to that group?" "About 300 moms from school. David, do you think—" David's phone buzzed again. "Melissa, I'm waiting for you at the restaurant. I got a table with an amazing view." David looked at Sarah, who was visibly worried. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to meet her. I need to understand what's going on." David, this could be dangerous. Let me go with you. No. If it's what we're thinking, I don't want to scare her. But I promise I'll be careful. The trip to the Koppen building, where the Sky Room was located, was tense. David couldn't stop thinking about how Melissa had orchestrated the meeting. At the same time, he fought against an internal voice, insisting he could be wrong, that it might just be a coincidence. The panoramic elevator of the Sky Room offered a spectacular view of New York, but David barely noticed the scenery. His heart raced as he headed to the restaurant on the 41st floor. Melissa was there, radiant in a green dress that highlighted her eyes, strategically positioned near the windows. She waved enthusiastically when she saw him. "David! What an incredible view, right? Thank you for making this dream possible." She seemed genuinely excited, and for a moment, David felt guilty for his suspicions. Maybe he was being paranoid. "It really is impressive," he agreed, sitting at the table. "Melissa, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Ask me anything." "How exactly did you know I would be at the Olive Garden yesterday?" Melissa hesitated for a fraction of a second, so brief it almost went unnoticed. "Your sister gave me your contact, remember? She said where the meeting would be." "But my sister said she doesn't know." "You?" Melissa's smile faltered. "Oh, there must have been some misunderstanding. Maybe it was a mutual friend who organized everything." David realized she was improvising. "Which friend? Look, how about we order appetizers first? I'm starving." Melissa quickly changed the subject, calling the waiter with exaggerated enthusiasm. During lunch, she insisted on the most expensive dishes on the menu: lobster, imported wine, chef's special dessert. "You know, David, I rarely get the chance to come to places like this. My disability benefits aren't very generous." "Disability benefits?" "Yes, from Social Security. After the accident, it was all I could get. It's hard to survive on so little in New York, especially with all the medical expenses." David felt a pang of guilt for his suspicions. If she really depended on Social Security, it was understandable that she would seize the opportunity to experience luxuries she normally couldn't afford. "That must be really tough," he murmured, gently touching her hand. "It is, but I prefer not to dwell on it. I try to live each day as if it's special." Her eyes filled with tears. "That's why yesterday was so important to me. I haven't felt normal, desired in a long time." David's heart ached. How could he suspect someone who had been through so much? He was being a paranoid fool, influenced by Sarah's overprotectiveness. "You are an incredible woman, Melissa. Any man would be lucky to have you by his side." "Do you really think so?" She squeezed his hand. "Because I'm afraid people only see the wheelchair, not the woman I still am inside." "I see the woman, Melissa. A strong, intelligent, and beautiful woman." The smile she gave him seemed so genuine that David felt completely disarmed in his suspicions. When the bill arrived, $420, he paid without hesitation. As they left, Melissa suggested they take a walk around the city center. "I love the hustle and bustle of downtown on Saturdays. It makes me feel part of the city's life." They strolled down Broadway, stopping at a few shops. David noticed she showed particular interest in the windows of jewelry stores, always commenting on the pricier pieces. "That gold bracelet is beautiful," she sighed in front of a display. "I've always dreamed of having a piece like that," but she left the sentence hanging with a wistful smile. David felt the urge to go into the store and buy the bracelet for her, but he held back. It was too soon for such grand gestures. When they said goodbye in the late afternoon, Melissa held his hands. "David, can I confess something? I'm afraid I'm dreaming. You seem too good to be true." "The feeling is mutual," he replied, kissing her forehead. "How about we have dinner tomorrow? I know a special place in West Village." David immediately agreed, already eagerly anticipating their next meeting. On the way back home, he couldn't wipe the smile off his face. Melissa was truly special. Perhaps he had finally found someone with whom he could build something solid. But if David knew that at that very moment Melissa was in a group chat called Golden Targets, sharing information about his apartment in the Upper East Side and speculating about his wealth with 3 other women, he might reconsider his certainties. Sunday dawned cloudy in New York, but David's mood was sky high. He woke up earlier than usual, still thinking about the wonderful lunch with Melissa the day before. As he prepared breakfast for Emily, his phone vibrated with a message that made his heart race. "Good morning, handsome. I can't wait for dinner tonight. I chose a very special place for us." David smiled like a lovesick teenager. There was something about Melissa that made him feel young again, as if all the worries and responsibilities of the last 2 years simply vanished when he was with her. "Dad, you look like a fool," Emily commented, sitting at the kitchen table in her pink unicorn pajamas. At 8 years old, she had a keen perception of her father's mood changes. "What's up, princess? I'm just happy, because of the girl in the wheelchair." David sighed. "Her name is Melissa. Isa. And yes, she makes me feel good." Emily chewed her cereal in silence for a few moments before asking, "Dad, why did Mom leave?" The question caught David off guard. Emily rarely mentioned Jessica, and he always avoided the topic to protect her. "Sweetheart, sometimes adults make tough decisions." "Was it because of me?" "No." David immediately put down his coffee cup and hugged his daughter. "It was never your fault, my love. Mom, she wasn't ready to be a mother, but that has nothing to do with you. You are perfect." "So it was. Your fault?" The brutal innocence of the question cut like a blade. David had asked himself that same question thousands of times over the past 2 years. Maybe if he had paid more attention to Jessica during the pregnancy, if he had been more present, more understanding. Sometimes people just aren't compatible, princess. Like when you don't like broccoli, it's not your fault or the broccoli's, you just don't match. Emily seemed to accept the explanation, but David noticed something was bothering her. "Dad, what if this Melissa decides to leave too? Are you going to be sad again?" The question hit David hard. For 2 years, he had built an emotional barrier to protect himself from the pain of rejection. Now, for the first time since Jessica, he was allowing someone to cross that barrier. What if Emily was right? What if it was just a matter of time before Melissa gave up too? "Isa, sometimes in life we need to take risks to be happy. But I promise you one thing, no matter what happens with anyone, I will never leave you. Never." The phone buzzed again. Melissa. "David, can we go to the olive tree today? I've always wanted to go. If it's too expensive, we can go somewhere else. But it would be a dream." David knew the Olive Tree by name, one of the most expensive restaurants in New York, frequented by business people and celebrities. A single meal there would cost more than he usually spent on a whole week of food. But Melissa's message, with that sad face at the end, touched him deeply. How many times must she have walked past places like that, dreaming of being able to enter? "Of course, it would be my pleasure to treat you," he typed back. The response came instantly. "Seriously, you are amazing. I can't believe I'm going to make this dream come true. Love you." The words "love you" made David choke on his coffee. It was too soon for declarations like that, but Melissa's spontaneity was charming. She had no filters, speaking directly from the heart. "Dad, are you okay? You're red," Emily observed. "I'm great, princess." Later, as David got ready for dinner, white dress shirt, navy blazer, freshly polished dress shoes, Sarah appeared at the apartment unannounced, as she always did on Sundays. "Where's Emily?" "Watching cartoons." "In the living room. Sarah, we need to talk." About this Melissa, David, I've done a little more digging. Sarah, stop. I know you're worried, but you're overreacting. David, this story is strange. None of Emily's friends' moms know a Melissa in a wheelchair, and I called some friends who work at the city hall. No one has heard any comments about her project. David felt a chill run down his spine, but forced himself to stay calm. Maybe she got confused or heard indirectly. David, you're falling for a woman who appeared out of nowhere, knowing intimate details of your life, and you don't find that strange. She is special, Sarah. After everything she's been through, she deserves to be happy. And you? Don't you deserve to be happy too? But safely? David looked at himself in the mirror, adjusting his tie. He looked good, elegant. He felt confident for the first time in years. Sarah, I know you want to protect me, but I need to live my life. I can't spend the rest of my life afraid of being hurt. Sarah sighed, recognizing her brother's determination. Okay, but promise me you'll be careful, and if anything seems off, you tell me. I promise. The olive tree was located in the Upper East Side, an upscale area of New York. David arrived 15 minutes early and was impressed by the elegance of the setting. The restaurant was famous not only for its exceptional food, but also for the centuries-old olive tree that grew in the middle of the dining room, creating a unique and romantic atmosphere. Melissa arrived promptly at 8 p.m., and David had to admit she looked stunning. She wore a black dress with thin straps that beautifully contrasted with her fair skin, and she had styled her hair in an elaborate way that showcased her neck. Her jewelry, pearl earrings and a delicate necklace, was understated but clearly expensive. "David! I can't believe I'm here!" she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with emotion as she took in the surroundings. "It's even more beautiful than I imagined. You look beautiful, Melissa." "Thank you. I bought this dress especially for today. I spent a little more than I should have, but I wanted to look nice for you." The confession touched David. Had she gone into debt to impress him? "You didn't have to do that." "I did. You've been so special to me. I want you to feel proud to be with me." During dinner, Melissa demonstrated surprising knowledge about wines, suggesting a bottle of 1998 Cabernet Sauvignon that cost $160. "My ex-boyfriend was a sommelier," she explained when David showed surprise. "I learned a lot from him before everything changed." The mention of her ex stirred unexpected jealousy in David. "Did you break up because of the accident?" Melissa's face darkened. "He said he couldn't handle the situation, that our sex life would never be the same." Tears began to form in her eyes. It was devastating to discover that his love was so superficial. David took her hand. "He was an idiot. Any man who would leave you for that didn't deserve you." "Do you really think so? Sometimes I'm afraid that no man can see me as..." "Michelle, you are the most sensual woman I have ever met. Your disability does not define you." The smile she gave him was radiant, but there was something in her eyes, a satisfaction almost triumphant, that went unnoticed by David. "You know, David, I have a confession to make," she said, nervously fiddling with the napkin. "I'm going through some financial difficulties. My physical therapy is very expensive, and the Social Security benefits barely cover the rent." "You don't need to explain." "No, I do. I don't want you to think I'm only interested in expensive places. It's just that I haven't felt special in so long. When you take me to these beautiful places, for a few moments I can forget all the limitations and feel like the woman I was before." David felt his heart tighten. "Michelle, you can tell me anything. I'm here to support you. There's an experimental treatment in the United States," she said, lowering her voice as if it were a secret. "The doctors say it could restore some feeling to my legs, but it costs $50,000. The amount was astronomical. David swallowed hard. And are you considering it? I dream about it every day. Imagine being able to dance again, walk on the beach, climb stairs. Her tears seemed genuine. But I know it's impossible. I'll never be able to save that much money. David felt an urge to hug her, to promise that he would help her somehow, but $50,000 was more than $250,000 Brazilian reais, his entire savings, and still a considerable bank loan. Have you talked to your family about this? My parents died in the same accident that left me like this, Michelle lied with impressive ease. It was a family outing. I was the only survivor. The story was devastating. David felt like a monster for questioning her intentions. How could he suspect someone who had lost so much? When the bill arrived, $240, David felt a knot in his stomach but paid without hesitation. Michelle kissed his hand gratefully. Thank you for this magical night, David. I haven't felt so alive in years. On the way to drop her off at home, David would finally see where Michelle lived, but when they arrived at the address she provided, a simple housing complex in the suburb, she asked him to drop her off at the entrance. It's just that the doorman is very strict with visitors, she explained, and my apartment is on the 5th floor, no elevator. It would be embarrassing for you to have to carry me. David offered to carry her, but she vehemently refused. I don't want our night to end with you seeing me as a burden. They said goodbye with a long, passionate kiss. David drove home, feeling on cloud 9, already planning how he could help Michelle achieve her treatment dream. What he didn't see was Michelle waiting until his car completely disappeared, walking 2 blocks and getting into an Uber that would take her to her real address, a luxury apartment in the Upper East Side, overlooking Central Park. That night, while David dreamed of a future with Michelle, she was updating a detailed spreadsheet on her laptop, calculating exactly how long it would take to convince him to lend the $250,000 for the non-existent treatment. Monday arrived with a light, persistent rain that made New York even grayer. David woke up to the alarm at 6:30 a.m., but he had already been awake for an hour, looking at his phone and waiting for a message from Michelle. Dinner at the Olive Tree had been perfect, and he couldn't stop thinking about her vulnerability in sharing the treatment in the United States. While making his morning coffee, he finally received the message he had been waiting for. Good morning, my love. Thank you for last night. I couldn't sleep thinking about how special you are. The my love made David smile involuntarily. They were getting close quickly, perhaps too quickly, but after 2 years of loneliness, the intensity of his feelings was addictive. Good morning, beautiful. How about lunch today? I can pick you up from work, he typed back. The response took a few minutes. Oh, what a shame. I have physical therapy until late today, but how about dinner tomorrow? I know a special place in the West Village. Another expensive restaurant, David thought, but he immediately felt guilty for the thought. Michelle had spent years deprived of these simple pleasures. It was natural for her to want to make up for lost time. Emily, let's go, otherwise you'll be late for school, he called, grabbing the car keys. On the way to St. Mary's Academy, Emily was quieter than usual. David watched her in the rearview mirror. She had the same thoughtful look that Jessica used to have when something bothered her. Dad, can I meet Michelle? She suddenly asked. Of course, Princess, but remember that she has difficulty climbing stairs. Our apartment. We can meet somewhere with an elevator, like at the mall. Emily's suggestion was sensible. David had been postponing this meeting, knowing that his daughter's approval would be crucial for any serious relationship. How about Saturday? We can have lunch together at the Galleria. Okay, Emily agreed, but her tone didn't show enthusiasm. At the construction company office, David could hardly concentrate on work. During the project follow-up meeting for downtown, his mind wandered to Michelle, imagining how it would be to introduce her to Emily, how it would be to have a complete family again. "David, are you okay?" asked his partner Mark after the meeting. "You seem different." "I'm seeing someone special," David admitted. "Really? Dude, that's great. It was about time. What's she like?" David hesitated. How could he explain to Mark that he was in love with a woman he had only met 3 days ago? "She's complex. She's been through tough situations, but she's amazing." "Disability?" Mark asked directly. They had known each other for 15 years, since college. "She uses a wheelchair. Car accident 3 years ago." Mark made a thoughtful expression. "And you're okay with that?" "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" "Dude, no prejudice, but you—" Raphael had always been a bit overly protective. "Remember Jessica? You were always trying to solve all her problems. The bug comment bothered David. This is different. Michelle is strong, independent." "Okay, sorry. Just be careful not to confuse compassion with love, you know?" Marcella's remark echoed in David's mind all day. Was that it? Was it compassion? No, he decided. What he felt for Michelle was real, intense, different from anything he had ever experienced. That evening, while picking up Emily from school, David noticed his daughter chatting animatedly with a classmate near the gate. As he approached, he heard fragments of their conversation. "My mom said she knows a girl who pretends to be disabled to get money from men." "Emily!" David called, interrupting the conversation. "Let's go, princess." In the car, he asked, "What were you talking about?" "Nothing important, Dad. Marina was telling some weird stories her mom heard." David felt a discomfort, but decided not to press further. Kids always spread unfounded rumors. On Tuesday, David dressed with special care for dinner in West Village. Michelle had suggested Spot, a trendy restaurant frequented by successful young professionals. He arrived 15 minutes early and found her already waiting at the bar, chatting animatedly with the bartender. "David!" she exclaimed, elegantly turning her wheelchair to greet him. "I was telling Paolo here about my work as an accessibility consultant." Accessibility consultant. David didn't remember her mentioning that before. "Yes, I help companies adapt their spaces for people with disabilities. It's rewarding to use my experience to help others," she explained enthusiastically. "By the way, Paolo, thanks for the wine tips. You really know your stuff." The bartender smiled. "Anytime, Michelle. You have good taste." During dinner, Michelle was particularly eloquent, sharing stories about her clients and the challenges of making New York more accessible. David was impressed by her technical knowledge about ramps, elevators, and building codes. "You seem to know a lot about this," he commented. "When you live the reality, you learn quickly," she replied, touching his hand. "You know, David, I have a confession. I visited a private doctor today about that treatment I told you about." David felt a knot in his stomach. "And?" "He said I need to decide soon. There's an opening in December, but I have to confirm by the end of the month. And the cost has gone up. It's now $60,000. The amount was even more daunting. David swallowed hard. "Michelle, that's a lot of money." "I know," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "It's impossible. I'll have to give up the dream of walking again." Her sadness seemed so genuine that David felt compelled to promise anything to see her happy. What if I helped you?" Michelle's eyes lit up. "David, would you do that? But it's so much money. I couldn't accept." "It wouldn't be a gift. It would be a loan. You could pay me back when you can." "Really? You would lend me $60,000. The amount she mentioned was even higher than David had calculated. It's a lot of money, Michelle. I would need to..." Think, talk to the bank. She held both his hands. David, you're an angel. Just the fact that you're considering this, I have no words. Dinner cost more than 160, but David barely noticed. His mind was busy calculating how he could come up with $60,000. He would have to use all his savings, sell some stocks, maybe take out a loan using his apartment as collateral. After dropping Michelle off at the usual place, she kept insisting that the building didn't have adequate accessibility. David drove home in a state of emotional turmoil. How had he reached the point of considering lending a fortune to a woman he had known for just a week? Upon arriving home, he found Sarah waiting at the building's door with a serious expression he knew well. "Sarah, what are you doing here at this hour?" "David, we need to talk, now." They went upstairs in silence. Sarah waited until they reached the living room to start. "I hired a private investigator." "You did what?" "David, I was worried, and my suspicions were confirmed. Michelle isn't who she says she is." David felt the world spin. "Sarah, you're crazy. How can you—" "Sit down and listen to me." Sarah pulled a folder from her bag. "Michelle Santos, 28 years old, originally from Austin. But David, she has no physical disability. Never has." "That's impossible. She's an actress. Or at least she was, until she was kicked out of a theater company for stealing money from her colleagues. In the last 2 years, she's pulled the same scam on at least 5 different men." David shook his head vigorously. "No, I see her in the wheelchair. She can't walk." "David, she rents the wheelchair. The investigator has photos of her walking normally, going in and out of expensive apartments, driving cars." Sarah handed over some photographs. David took them with trembling hands. The first showed Michelle walking normally down Broadway, wearing expensive clothes and carrying shopping bags. The second showed her entering a luxury building in the Upper East Side. The third, more devastating, showed her kissing another man at the door of an upscale restaurant. "When was this photo taken?" David asked, pointing to the last one. "Last night, after dinner with you." David felt nauseous. Everything collapsed instantly. The strange coincidences, the knowledge about his life, the specific interest in money, the refusal to visit his apartment. She was asking to borrow $60,000 for a medical treatment. "David, there is no treatment. It's all a lie." At that moment, David understood the extent of his naivety. For a week, he had been masterfully manipulated by a woman who had turned his emotional neediness and protective instinct against him. His first reaction was humiliation. How had he been so blind? How had he not seen the signs that now seemed so obvious? The second reaction was anger, not just against Michelle, but against himself for allowing the need to be loved to make him vulnerable to this kind of deception. He felt a sense of betrayal, but the third reaction, the most painful, was realizing that for a week he had believed he had finally found someone special, someone who understood him and accepted his imperfections. And now he would have to return to solitude, knowing that the feelings he thought were genuine were based on elaborate lies. "What do I do now, Sarah?" "You confront her, tomorrow, and make it clear that it's over." David nodded, but inside he knew that confronting Michelle would be harder than Sarah imagined. Because despite everything, a part of him still doubted that those moments of tenderness and connection were completely fabricated. And he was about to discover that underestimating Michelle had been just his first mistake. David barely managed to sleep that night. The photographs Sarah had shown him played on loop in his mind like a horror movie. Each memory from the past few days took on a new, sinister meaning. The intimate knowledge of his life, the constant suggestions for expensive restaurants, the touching story about the accident, everything had been an elaborate setup. At 5 a.m., He gave up trying to sleep and went to the kitchen to make coffee. His hands trembled as he stirred the sugar. How had he been so naive? At 34 years old, a successful engineer, a responsible father, how had he fallen into such an obvious trap? "Dad?" Emily's sleepy voice brought him back to reality. "Why are you awake so early?" David looked at his daughter, still in her pink pajamas, her hair tousled from sleep. At 8 years old, she had shown more intuition about Michelle than he had. "I couldn't sleep, Princess." "Is it because of Michelle?" Emily's direct question caught him off guard. "Why do you ask that?" Emily approached and climbed onto a chair to reach the glasses in the cupboard. "You've been different since you met her. Aunt Sarah was worried yesterday. I heard you two talking." David sighed. There was no point in trying to hide it. Emily was too smart. "Michelle isn't the person I thought she was." "Did she lie to you?" "Yes, she lied about many important things." Emily poured herself some orange juice and stayed silent for a few moments, processing the information. "Dad, are you going to be sad again, like when Mom left?" The question cut like a blade. David knelt beside his daughter and held her little hands. "Emily, I'm upset, yes, but I'm not going to be like that time, because now I know that no matter what happens, I have you, and that's the most important thing." Emily hugged her father tightly. "I knew she was strange. The girls at school said that." "What did the girls at school say?" "Marina's mom saw her walking normally at the Galleria, but I didn't want to say anything because you seemed happy." David closed his eyes, feeling a mix of love and sadness for his daughter. She had tried to protect him, just as he always tried to protect her. The day at the office was a torment. David couldn't concentrate on anything. During the morning meeting, Marcelo noticed his distraction. "Man, you look terrible. Want to talk?" In the private room, David told the whole story. Marcelo listened in silence, shaking his head in disbelief. "Dude, what a piece of work." Marcelo stopped himself. "Sorry, but what a situation. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to confront her tonight. We have dinner planned." "Do you want me to go with you?" "No, I need to do this alone." At 7 p.m., David arrived at the restaurant that Michelle had suggested, yet another expensive place in the West Village. She was there, radiant as always, wearing a red dress that accentuated her fair skin. For a moment, David almost doubted the evidence. How could someone so beautiful and seemingly sweet be so calculating? "David, so good to see you," she exclaimed, extending her arms to hug him. "I was eager to tell you some news about the treatment." David didn't return the hug with his usual enthusiasm. "What news?" "The doctor said that if I can get the money by Friday, he can include me in a special group in January. David, it could be my only chance to walk again." Her eyes sparkled with an emotion that seemed genuine. For a moment, David hesitated. What if Sarah was wrong? What if the photos were fakes or had been taken before the accident? But then he remembered the photo of Michelle kissing another man the night before, and reality hit him hard. "Michelle, we need to talk about something important." "Sure, about the loan, David, I know. It's a lot of money, but I promise that it's not about the loan." David took a deep breath. "It's about you." Something in his tone made Michelle's smile falter slightly. "What do you mean?" "I know about the apartment in the Upper East Side. I know you don't have any disability. I know about the other men." The silence that followed was deafening. Michelle stared at him for long seconds, her expression shifting from surprise to something more calculating. "David, what are you talking about? What other men?" "Michelle, I have photographs. You walking normally. You with other men. It's over." For the first time since they met, Michelle appeared genuinely shaken. Her hands, which always gestured gracefully, became still on the table. "David, did you investigate me?" Her voice was different, colder, lacking the usual melodic tone. My sister hired a private investigator. Michelle closed her eyes for a moment, as if processing the information and formulating a new strategy. When she opened them again, they belonged to a completely different person. "All right," she said, her voice now firm and without pretense. "You want the truth? I'll give you the truth." David braced himself to hear confirmations of his worst suspicions, but what came next completely caught him off guard. "You're right about some things, David. I can walk. I didn't have any accident. And yes, there are other men." Her voice was calm, almost professional. "But you don't know why. Because you're a con artist. Because I have a sister, 6 years with cerebral palsy." David's world stopped. "What?" "My sister, Sophie. She really can't walk. She was born with severe cerebral palsy. My parents died in an accident when I was 19, and she was one. Since then, I've been the one taking care of her." Genuine tears began to form in Michelle's eyes. "David, do you know how much it costs to raise a child with special needs? Physical therapy, speech therapy, medications, special equipment, caregivers. It's over $8,000 a month." David felt the ground disappear beneath his feet again. But why lie? Why the charade? "Because when I tell the truth, men run away. When I say, 'Look, I'm a 28-year-old woman who has to support a disabled child. I don't have time to go out every night. Most of my money goes to medical treatments,' they disappear." Michelle took out her phone and showed David a picture. It was of a beautiful blonde girl in a special wheelchair, smiling at the camera. "But when I pretend to be the disabled one, when I awaken their protective instinct, when they feel like heroes for accepting a woman with limitations, that's when they open their wallets." David stared at the picture of the girl. "So, the money. Every cent goes to Sophie, the apartment in the Upper East Side, rented with money from a businessman who fell in love with me last year. The expensive restaurants, they're the only opportunities I have to eat well, since at home we only have rice and beans." The revelation was simultaneously relieving and disturbing. Michelle wasn't a heartless sociopath, but she also wasn't the victim she had pretended to be. "And the feelings?" David asked. "Was everything a lie?" Michelle hesitated for the first time since she began telling the truth. "At first, yes. You were just another target. Single man, successful, emotionally needy. And after? After, you were different from the others. You actually cared about me as a person, not just feeling superior for helping a poor thing. You talked about your dreams, your fears about your daughter, and I started to feel guilty." David didn't know whether to feel better or worse. "Guilty enough to stop? Guilty enough to consider telling you the truth, but then you offered the money for the treatment, and David, it's $60,000. That would pay for 2 years of care for Sophie." The restaurant around them continued to operate normally. Waiters serving tables, couples chatting, the sound of cutlery and glasses. But for David, it was as if they were in an isolated bubble where his reality was being completely rewritten. "Michelle, you completely deceived me." "Yes, I did, and I hate myself for it, especially because—" She paused, as if battling herself. "Because what?" "Because for the first time in years, when I was with you, I felt like a normal woman, not like a desperate caregiver or a con artist, just Michelle." David looked at her, really looked. He saw the exhaustion hidden beneath the makeup, the tension in her shoulders, the calloused hands he had attributed to physical therapy, but now understood were from caring day and night for a child with special needs. "David, I know you will never forgive me, and I understand. But I need you to know one thing. When I said I was falling for you, I wasn't lying." She stood up from the chair, and David realized it was the first time he had seen her stand, grabbed her bag, and headed for the exit. At the door, she turned one last time. If you ever want to meet the real Michelle, not the con artist or the victim, but the woman who takes care of her sister and who was starting to dream of being happy, my number is still the same. And she left, leaving David alone with a bill of $80 and the devastating realization that for the second time in his life he had lost someone he loved. But this time he didn't know if the blame was his, hers, or the cruel circumstances that sometimes force good people to do terrible things. David sat in the restaurant for almost an hour after Michelle left, staring at the untouched plate of food and trying to process the whirlwind of emotions that was devastating his chest. The revelation had turned his world upside down once again. She wasn't the fragile victim she had pretended to be, but she also wasn't the cruel villain the evidence suggested. She was something more complex, more human, a desperate woman making morally questionable choices to protect those she loved. When he finally got home, he found Aunt Sarah waiting in the living room, playing puzzles with Emily. His sister looked up expectantly. "How was it?" "Complicated," David replied, kissing Emily's forehead. "Princess, can you go brush your teeth? Daddy needs to talk to Aunt Sarah." After Emily went to the bathroom, David told Aunt Sarah everything about the conversation. She listened in silence, her expression shifting from initial satisfaction to growing concern. "David, are you considering believing this story?" "Aunt Sarah, I saw the picture of the child. Pictures can be from anywhere. David, this woman is a professional manipulator. Now that the first story didn't work, she invented a second one that's even more touching." David shook his head. "No, Aunt Sarah, there was something different about her when she talked about her sister. It was genuine. David, listen to what you're saying. She completely deceived you for a week, made you believe she was disabled, seduced you to get $60,000, and now you want to believe in a new story." Aunt Sarah's logic was relentless, but David couldn't ignore what he had seen in Michelle's eyes when she spoke about Sophie. What if it's true? What if she really has a sick sister? "And so, that doesn't justify what she did to you." "It doesn't justify, but it explains." Aunt Sarah sighed deeply. "David, you're doing exactly what Jessica, making excuses for unacceptable behaviors because you can't accept that you chose poorly." The comparison with Jessica hit David like a punch to the stomach. This is different, is it? Jessica also had her reasons for treating you poorly. Depression, the pressure of motherhood, a difficult family, and you always found ways to justify it, even until she simply abandoned you. David sat heavily on the sofa. Was Sarah right? Was he repeating the same pattern of falling for troubled women and then making excuses for their destructive behaviors? "Sarah, I know you want to protect me, but I need to find out the truth for myself." "How? Are you going to hire another investigator?" "No, I'm going to meet her sister." "David! If Melissa is lying about Sophie, I'll find out quickly. If she's telling the truth, then I need to decide what to do with that information." Sarah shook her head in frustration. "David, you're playing with fire. This woman has already proven she's capable of crafting sophisticated lies." "I know, but I also know that if I don't do this, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what if." On Thursday morning, David texted Melissa, "I would like to meet Sophie." The reply came 3 hours later. "Why?" "Because I need to understand who you really are." "David, I'm not trying to convince you of anything, I was just being honest. Even so, I would like to meet her." There was a long pause before the next message. "Saturday morning, Rehabilitation Institute at General Hospital. Sophie has physical therapy at 10 a.m. If you really want to come, meet us there." David spent Friday in growing anxiety. At the office, he could hardly concentrate. Marcelo tried to convince him to abandon the idea. Man, you're walking into a trap. She's going to present any kid as her sister. Marcelo, the Rehabilitation Institute isn't a place where you take just any kid pretending to be a relative. They have records, files. What if she really has a disabled sister? Does that change what she did to you? The question echoed in David's mind. Did it change? If Melissa was truly caring for a child with special needs, did that make her methods less reprehensible, or just more understandable? On Saturday morning, David woke up early and got ready carefully. He decided not to tell Emily where he was going. He didn't want to create false expectations or unnecessary worries. General Hospital was a massive complex in the central region of New York. The Rehabilitation Institute was located in a modern building, equipped with all necessary adaptations for people with disabilities. David arrived at 9:45 a.m. and waited in the lobby, observing the flow of patients, families, and healthcare professionals. At exactly 10 a.m., he saw Melissa approaching, pushing a special wheelchair. And there was Sophie. David felt the air leave his lungs. The girl looked exactly like the picture Melissa had shown, curly blonde hair, expressive blue eyes, a radiant smile that lit up her whole face. But it was obvious that she had severe limitations. Her arms and legs had involuntary movements characteristic of cerebral palsy, and her head needed special support in the chair. "Sophie, this is David, the guy I told you about," Melissa said, her voice filled with a tenderness David had never heard before. "Hi, David," Sophie said, her speech slightly slurred but perfectly understandable. "Mel said you're an engineer. Do you build really tall buildings?" David knelt in front of the chair to be at her eye level. "Yes, I build buildings, some really tall ones. I want to go up a really tall building and see the whole city, but I can't climb stairs." "Sophie, did you know there are special elevators that can take you to the top of the tallest buildings in New York?" Sophie's eyes lit up. "Really? Mel, is that true?" Melissa smiled, and David noticed it was the first genuine smile he had seen on her face since they met. "It's true, sweetheart. Maybe one day we can do that." For the next hour, David accompanied Sophie during physical therapy. He watched Melissa interact with the therapists, demonstrating impressive technical knowledge about the exercises, medications, and equipment. He saw how she encouraged Sophie with every small progress, how she knew exactly the girl's limitations and potentials. "How long has Melissa been taking care of Sophie?" David discreetly asked. The therapist. "As long as I can remember. They are very close. Melissa is very dedicated. She never misses a session, always on time, always attentive to the guidelines. It's rare to see that level of commitment." After physical therapy, the three of them went for a snack at a nearby diner. Sophie was a bright and communicative child, telling David about her classes at the special school, her favorite drawings, her dreams of one day seeing the sea. "Mel promised that when I turn 7, we're going to the beach, but she said it's expensive," Sophie commented innocently. David looked at Melissa, who averted her gaze in embarrassment. "We'll manage, Sophie. We always do." "Mel, can David come with us? That way you won't be sad when you think I'm not watching." The girl's observation caught both adults off guard. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Melissa asked. "You get sad sometimes, especially when you're paying the bills. And at night, when you think I'm asleep, you cry. I hear you." Melissa closed her eyes, visibly shaken. "Sophie, but when you talked about David, you were different, happier. That's why I thought he could help you not cry anymore." David felt his heart tighten. Sophie's innocence had exposed a truth that neither Melissa nor he were prepared to face. "Sophie, do you want to see the fish in the aquarium over there?" David asked, pointing to a small decorative aquarium in the diner. "I do," she exclaimed. David pushed the chair over to the aquarium, letting the two women talk privately, but he could hear fragments of the conversation. "Sophie, you can't say those things to people." "But it's true, Michelle, and he seems nice, and you deserve to be happy too." When they returned, Michelle had red eyes. "David, thank you for coming. I think you've seen what you needed to see." In the hospital parking lot, after they put Sophie in the adapted car that David discovered was rented weekly, they sat in silence for a few minutes. "She's amazing," David finally said. "Yeah, she's the most special person I've ever met." "Michelle, how much do you spend a month on her care?" "David, I'm not trying to convince you of anything. Just answer." Michelle sighed. "Between 8 and 10,000, depending on whether she needs new equipment or special tests." "And how much do you earn?" "Officially, I work part-time at a clothing store in the mall. Minimum wage. The rest come from the methods you already know." David quickly did the math. It was impossible to support Sophie on a minimum wage. "Michelle, why didn't you seek official help? Government, NGOs?" "David, do you think I haven't tried? The waiting list for physical therapy through Medicaid is 2 years long. The equipment she needs isn't provided. Public special schools are overcrowded." The frustration in her voice was palpable. When you have a child who needs special care, you quickly find out that the system doesn't work. Either you have money or she doesn't get the proper treatment. David looked at the car where Sophie was waiting, humming a children's song. "And the men you deceived?" "They were all rich, David. Very rich. For them, a few $1,000s were insignificant. For Sophie, it meant a few more months of proper treatment. That doesn't make it right." "No, it doesn't." Michelle looked him straight in the eye. "But when you see a 6-year-old child crying in pain because she can't afford the physical therapy she needs, morality becomes more flexible." David understood at that moment that he had entered a territory much more complex than he had imagined. It wasn't simply about right or wrong, victim or villain. It was about a young woman making impossible decisions in a desperate situation, in a society that abandons its most vulnerable. "David, I know we'll never have a future together. I know I broke any chance of that when I lied to you. But thank you for coming today. It meant a lot to me that you wanted to meet Sophie." As he drove back home, David knew that his life had changed irreversibly that morning, because now he could no longer pretend he didn't know about Sophie, about Michelle, about the brutal reality they faced every day. And for the first time since the beginning of this whole story, David began to wonder not if Michelle deserved forgiveness, but if he would be able to live with himself, knowing the truth and doing nothing about it. David spent the next 3 days in a state of emotional turmoil that affected every aspect of his life. At the office, Mark often found him standing in front of the architectural plans, lost in thoughts that clearly had nothing to do with civil engineering. At home, Emily noticed that her father was distant, answering her questions with monosyllables and forgetting to check her homework. "Dad, are you sad about the girl who lied?" Emily asked on Tuesday night while they were having ramen. David had completely forgotten to go grocery shopping. "Not exactly, Princess. It's more complicated than that." "Was she really bad?" David paused, the fork suspended in the air. How to explain to an 8-year-old that the world didn't simply divide into good and bad people? She did wrong things, but for reasons she thought were right. "Like when I lied to you about brushing my teeth because I was lazy, but then I felt bad." Emily's innocent comparison made David smile for the first time in days. "More or less, but much more complicated." "Do you still like her?" His daughter's direct question caught him off guard. Did he still like Michelle, after everything he had discovered? "I don't know, Issa. I'm still trying to understand my feelings. On Wednesday, David made a decision that surprised even himself. He called the Rehabilitation Institute and asked about volunteer programs. If he couldn't get Sophie and Michelle out of his mind, at least he could do something productive with that concern. We always need volunteers, explained the program coordinator, especially for recreational activities with the kids. What hours are you available? Saturday mornings, David replied, remembering Sophie's physical therapy schedule. On Thursday night, Sarah showed up at his apartment unannounced, as she always did when she suspected her brother was making questionable decisions. David, Mrs. Johnson at the gate said you've been leaving early on Saturdays. Where have you been going? Sarah, are you spying on me through the gate? I'm worried about you. Since that whole thing with Michelle, you've been acting strange, and if you're thinking about seeing her again... Sarah, sit down. David decided to tell her about the meeting with Sophie and his decision to volunteer. Sarah listened in silence, her expression shifting from concern to something close to desperation. David, you can't be serious. You're going to volunteer at the same place where she takes her sister. That's not coincidence. It's stalking. I'm not stalking anyone. I'm trying to do something useful. David, listen to what you're saying. You're restructuring your life around a woman who deceived you. That's unhealthy. The word unhealthy echoed in the apartment like a gunshot. David felt anger rising. Sarah, I know you want to protect me, but you need to stop treating me like I'm incapable of making decisions. What decisions? The decision to volunteer at the place where your favorite con artist shows up every Saturday. The decision to make excuses for a woman who pretended to be disabled to steal your money. She didn't steal anything. I offered her the money. Because she manipulated you into doing that. The argument escalated quickly. Emily appeared in the room in her pajamas, her eyes wide with shock. Why are you guys shouting? David and Sarah immediately stopped. Sorry, Princess, David murmured. Aunt Sarah and I were disagreeing about something. Is it about Michelle again? Sarah looked at her niece and then at David with an expression that mixed sadness and frustration. Emily, go brush your teeth because I'm leaving soon. After Emily left the room, Sarah lowered her voice. David, I don't want to fight with you, but I'm seeing you make the same mistakes you made with Jessica. You fall for troubled women and then try to save them. Sarah, I'm not trying to save anyone. No? Then what are you doing? David was silent for a long moment. What was he really doing? I'm trying to understand. Understand what? How a person can get to the point of doing what she did, how someone who clearly loves a child so much can make such desperate decisions. Sarah sighed deeply. David, even if everything she said about her sister is true, that doesn't change the fact that she completely deceived you. For a week, she made you believe in an elaborate lie to get money. I know that, and yet you want to keep in touch with her. I didn't say that, but that's what you're doing. David, you have a daughter who needs you, a life that needs to be rebuilt. Why are you wasting emotional energy on a situation that can only hurt you? Sarah's question was valid, and David didn't have a satisfactory answer. Why couldn't he just forget Michelle and move on? On Saturday morning, David arrived at the Rehabilitation Institute at 9 a.m. for his first session as a volunteer. The coordinator, Dr. Lucy, introduced him to the other volunteers and explained their roles to help entertain the children, waiting for their appointments. Many families arrive early and wait for hours, she explained. The children get anxious and bored. Our job is to make that wait more enjoyable. David was assigned to the children's recreation area, a colorful space with adapted toys, books, and educational games. At 9:30, the first families began to arrive. At 10:15, he saw Michelle come in with Sophie. She saw him too, and for a moment they stared at each other across the hallway. Sophie was the first to react. "Mel, look, it's David. Hi, David." Michelle slowly approached, pushing Sophie's wheelchair. "David, what are you doing here?" "Volunteering," he replied, trying to sound casual. "Since when?" "Since today." Michelle looked at him with an expression he couldn't decipher. "David, you don't have to do this." "Do what?" "Volunteer? You know what I'm talking about." Sophie interrupted the tense conversation. "David, will you play with me while I wait for physical therapy?" "Of course, Sophie." For the next hour, David played with Sophie and the other children. He watched Michelle from a distance, talking to other mothers, helping an elderly lady fill out forms, demonstrating detailed knowledge about procedures and schedules. It was clear she was a constant presence there. After Sophie's physical therapy, Michelle approached David again. "I need to talk to you, alone." She asked one of the other mothers to keep an eye on Sophie for a few minutes and stepped out with David to a small garden at the back of the hospital. "David, I know why you're here." "You do? You're feeling guilty. You're thinking that maybe you should help me financially, that maybe I'm not that bad." David didn't deny it. "And what if it's true?" "David, listen to what I'm going to tell you." Michelle took a deep breath. "I don't want your pity. I don't want your money out of guilt. And I definitely don't want you to restructure your life around my situation." "Why not?" "Because that wouldn't be fair to you, or to me, or to your daughter." "Michelle, I saw you two together. I saw how you care for her. I saw how much love there is between you. How can I just pretend I don't know that you're going through hard times? The same way you pretend not to know about all the other people who are going through hard times in New York. David, there are thousands of children like Sophie in this city. You can't save them all. But I can help one." Michelle shook her head. "Not like that. Not out of guilt or pity." "Then how?" "I don't know if there's a how, David. Maybe our story was just that. An intense week that taught us things about ourselves we didn't want to learn." David looked through the hospital windows and saw Sophie playing with other children, her crystal-clear laughter echoing down the hallway. "Michelle, was what you said about having feelings for me true?" "Yes." "Then why are you pushing me away?" "Because a person can't build a relationship based on lies and then expect it to work. Because you deserve someone who is honest from day one. And because I need to focus on being a better person for Sophie. And if I say I don't care about the lies, that I understand why you did what you did?" Michelle looked at him sadly. "Then I would say you still haven't understood what the real problem is here." "What is the real problem?" "That I'm capable of lying to someone I love when I think it's necessary. And sooner or later you would inevitably become part of that category of necessary. And then I would lie to you again and again until you couldn't trust anything I said anymore." Michelle's brutal honesty cut David like a blade. It was the most sincere thing she had said since they met. "David, you are a good man who deserves a good woman. I am a woman. Desperate people do bad things for reasons they consider justified. We both know how this story ends." Michelle headed back to the hospital, but stopped at the door. "Thank you for coming. Today, it meant a lot for Sophie to have someone special playing with her. But don't come back for our sake. If you want to volunteer, do it because it's something you really want to do." David was left alone in the garden for another 20 minutes, processing the conversation. Michelle had done something none of the other women in his life had done. She had been brutally honest about her flaws and had pushed him away to protect him. And for the first time, David began to question if maybe that was exactly what attracted him to her. The dangerous combination of vulnerability and self-sacrifice that awakened all his protective instincts and made him feel needed. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe he really had a self-destructive pattern of falling for women who needed to be saved. But as he drove back home, David couldn't stop thinking about a simple question. If Michelle was right about herself, why had she been honest enough to warn him? David spent the next 2 weeks on an emotional roller coaster that left him exhausted. During the day, he tried to focus on work, but often found himself thinking about Michelle and Sophie. At night, after putting Emily to bed, he lay awake, questioning every decision he had made lately. He continued volunteering at the Rehabilitation Institute, but now on Sunday mornings, deliberately avoiding the time he knew he would run into Michelle and Sophie. Even so, he couldn't stop asking the other volunteers about them. Michelle and Sophie? Oh, they are very dear here, commented Mrs. Johnson, a 60-year-old volunteer who had worked there for 5 years. The girl is a sweetheart, always cheerful despite everything, and Michelle, that girl carries the weight of the world on her shoulders. What do you mean? David asked, trying to sound casual. She's been taking care of Sophie on her own since the girl was a baby. I've never seen anyone so dedicated. She's always here, always on time, always knowing exactly what Sophie needs. Mrs. Johnson lowered her voice. Between us, I think she sacrifices too much. She never goes out, never has fun. She lives only for that child. And Sophie's father. What father? Michelle has always said they only have each other. During the 3rd week of December, David received an unexpected call at the office. It was Dr. Smith, Sophie's physical therapist. Mr. David, sorry to bother you. I got your number from Dr. Lisa from the volunteer coordination. It's about Sophie Johnson. David's heart raced. What happened? Is she okay? She's fine, but... Mr. David, Sophie asked if you could come to her physical therapy session on Saturday. She said she wanted to show you something special she managed to do. David hesitated. He had promised himself to keep his distance. Dr. Smith, I think it would be better. Mr. David, can I be frank? Sophie talks about you constantly. The engineer David. The David who builds tall buildings. The David who taught me about elevators. For a child who has few adults in her life, besides healthcare professionals, your presence has been very significant. Guilt hit David like a punch. How had he been so selfish? Sophie was just a 6-year-old child who had grown fond of him, and he was ignoring her because of complex issues with his sister. Of course, Dr. Smith. I'll be there on Saturday. On Friday night, David told Emily where he was going the next day. To his surprise, she showed no signs of jealousy or concern. Dad, is Sophie Melissa's little sister? Yes. And is she sick? David chose his words carefully. She was born with a condition that makes it hard for her to move her legs and arms like we do. But she's very smart and cheerful. Emily thought for a moment. Dad, can you bring a gift for her? I have a doll that I don't use anymore. She would like it. David's heart swelled with pride for his daughter. Of course, Princess. I'm sure she would love it. On Saturday, David arrived at the Rehabilitation Institute with Emily's doll, a red-haired Barbie dressed as a princess, wrapped in colorful paper. He found Sophie in the physical therapy room, more excited than ever. David, you came! Mel, look, David is here, she shouted when she saw him. Michelle was sitting in a chair next to the mat where Sophie was doing exercises. She looked genuinely surprised to see him. David, you didn't have to... Sophie called me, he explained simply, and I brought a gift from my daughter. Sophie's eyes lit up when she saw the wrapping. For me? A girl I don't even know gave me a gift. Her name is Emily. She's 8 years old, and she said she wanted you to have this. When Sophie opened the wrapping and saw the doll, her reaction was pure joy. Mel, look how pretty. She has fiery hair like Merida. It's Barbie, sweetheart, Michelle gently corrected. Can I give her a different name? Of course. David replied. What name do you want to give her? Emily, like the girl who gave her to me. David felt a lump in his throat. I'm sure Emily would be very happy to know that. During the physical therapy session, Sophie showed David the progress she had made. She could move her arms with more coordination and had significantly improved her speech. Dr. Smith said that if I keep improving like this, maybe one day I can stand on my own for a few seconds, she told him, beaming with pride. That's amazing, Sophie. You're very brave. After the session, the three of them went for a snack at the hospital cafe. Sophie played with her new doll while the adults chatted. How is she really doing? David asked discreetly. Better. The exercises are working, but... Michelle hesitated. David, can I ask you a question? Personal question. Sure. Why do you keep showing up, even after everything that happened? David thought carefully before answering. Because Sophie reminds me of why I decided to have kids. For the pure joy, for the ability to find magic in the little things. And me. Don't I remind you of anything? You remind me that people are more complicated than I would like them to be. Michelle smiled sadly. That's a diplomatic way of saying I disappoint you. No, it's a way of saying that you force me to question everything I thought I knew about right and wrong. And is that good or bad? I'm still figuring it out. Sophie interrupted the conversation. Mel, tell David about Christmas. Michelle looked visibly embarrassed. Sophie, what Christmas? David asked. We're going to spend Christmas just the two of us, like always, Sophie said casually. Mel said it's more special this way, just the two of us. David looked at Michelle, who was avoiding his gaze. Don't you have other family members? No, Michelle replied simply. It's just the two of us against the world. The casual phrase exposed a reality that David had not fully considered. Michelle had no support network, no family to share responsibilities, no close friends to offer. Emotional help. It was literally her and Sophie, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. David, what do you and your daughter do on Christmas? Sophie asked. We usually spend it with my sister and her cousins. How nice. How many people are there? About 15. Sophie sighed. That must be fun. I've always wanted to meet a big family. Sophie's innocent comment created an awkward silence. David looked at Michelle and saw a mix of sadness and resignation in her eyes. Sophie, he said impulsively, would you and Mel like to spend Christmas with us? Seriously, Sophie shouted, nearly dropping her doll. Mel, he invited us for Christmas. Michelle shook her head immediately. Sophie, honey, we can't. Why not? The girl asked, disappointed. Because David was just being polite. I wasn't, David said firmly. The invitation is serious. My sister always makes a huge dinner. There's always leftover food, and Emily would love to meet you. Mel, please, Sophie begged. I've never been to a real Christmas dinner. David saw Michelle struggling internally. He could almost hear the arguments in her head. We shouldn't get closer to him. This will complicate things even more. It's not fair. To either of us? Michelle, he said gently, it's just a Christmas dinner. Nothing more. Please, Mel. Sophie looked at her sister with pleading eyes. Michelle sighed deeply. Fine. But only if you promise to behave. I promise, Sophie shouted so loudly that other people in the diner turned to look. As David drove back home, he reflected on what he had just done. He had invited Michelle and Sophie to his family's Christmas. Sarah would be furious, Emily would be curious and possibly jealous, and he didn't know exactly how he felt. But one thing was certain. When he saw the joy on Sophie's face at the thought of a Christmas dinner with a big family, all his rational reservations simply vanished. Maybe Sarah was right about him having a self-destructive pattern. Or maybe, for the first time in a long time, He was doing something simply because it was the human thing to do. Arriving home, he found Emily eager to know how the meeting went. Did she like the doll? She loved it, and she gave it a special name. What? Emily, just like you. Emily's face lit up. Seriously? She named the doll after me? Yes. And Isa. They're coming to spend Christmas with us at Aunt Sarah's house. Emily processed the information. Sophie and Michelle are coming to our family for Christmas. Yes, do you mind? Emily thought for a moment. Dad, doesn't Sophie really have family? Just Michelle. Then that's fine. Everyone deserves to have family at Christmas. The simplicity of Emily's logic made David smile. If only adults could see things so clearly. Now came the hard part, telling Sarah that he had invited Michelle, the woman who had tried to con him, to spend Christmas with family. He was sure the conversation would be interesting. The call to Sarah was even worse than David had imagined. He waited until Monday night, after Emily had gone to bed, to have the inevitable conversation. You did what? Sarah's voice echoed through the phone so loudly that David had to pull the receiver away from his ear. Sarah, just listen. David, you've completely lost your mind. You invited a con artist to our family Christmas. My kids will be there. My mother is coming from a small town in Texas just for this dinner. Sarah, she has a 6-year-old child who has never been to a family Christmas dinner. And so, David, there are thousands of kids in difficult situations in New York. You can't save them all by bringing them to our house. The phrase echoed something Michelle had said, and it bothered David more than he expected. I'm not trying to save anyone. I'm just being human. David, you're being manipulated again. This woman is using the child to awaken your compassion. Sarah, I saw how they live. Sophie really has no one but Michelle, because Michelle made up this story. David, have you stopped to think that maybe this child isn't even really her sister? The suggestion caught David off guard. Sarah, don't be paranoid. They are clearly sisters. Clearly? Based on what? What Michelle told you? David, this woman pretended to be disabled for an entire week. Do you think she wouldn't be capable of using a sick child to manipulate you? David felt an uncomfortable doubt forming in his mind, but he pushed it away immediately. Sarah, I accompanied Sophie's physical therapy. I talked with... She really has cerebral palsy. No one is questioning if the child is sick. I'm questioning if she is really Michelle's sister. Why does that matter? Because if Michelle is lying about that too, then she is even more dangerous than we thought. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Sarah trying to convince David to cancel the invitation and David refusing categorically. The call ended with Sarah threatening to cancel the entire dinner if he insisted on bringing Michelle. Sarah, you can cancel if you want, but I'm spending Christmas with Emily, Sophie and Michelle at home. Emily is already excited about having other kids at the dinner. David, you're choosing a stranger over your own family. I'm choosing to do the right thing, Sarah, for the first time in a long time. After hanging up, David felt drained. Sarah wasn't completely wrong in her concerns, but she also couldn't see Sophie the way he did, an innocent child who deserved to experience the joy of a family Christmas. On Tuesday, David decided to do something he had been avoiding, research more deeply about Michelle and Sophie. If Sarah was right and there was something he didn't know, he needed to find out before Christmas. He discreetly hired the same private investigator that Sarah had used before. This time, he requested specific information about the relationship between Michelle and Sophie, the child's medical history, and any information about other relatives. The report arrived on Thursday and confirmed all the information that Michelle had provided. Sophie Johnson, 6 years old, born on March 15, 2017. Parents, Peter Johnson, deceased in a car accident in 2018, and Letitia Johnson, also deceased in the same accident. Legal guardian since 2018, Michelle Johnson, older sister. The medical report was detailed and devastating. Sophie had been born premature, with complications that resulted in cerebral palsy. She had been followed by the same neurologist since birth. The medical notes showed a child with slow but steady progress and frequently mentioned the exceptional dedication of the caregiver sister. There was no mention of other living relatives. There were no signs of fraud or irregular adoption. Sophie was indeed Michelle's sister, and they were truly alone in the world. David felt relieved and guilty at the same time, relieved to confirm that Michelle had been honest about Sophie, guilty for having doubted. On Friday, Christmas Eve, David called Sarah one last time. "Sarah, have you changed your mind about the dinner?" "David, if you bring that woman to my house, I'm leaving with the kids, then it will be at home. Are you willing to ruin the family's Christmas for a stranger?" "I'm willing to include two lonely people in a family celebration. If that means ruining something, maybe that something wasn't so solid after all." Sarah hung up without saying goodbye. On Saturday, Christmas Eve, David spent the day preparing the apartment to welcome Michelle and Sophie. He bought Christmas decorations, something he hadn't done in 2 years, arranged the small nativity scene that had belonged to his mother, and prepared a modest but thoughtful dinner. Emily helped him enthusiastically, especially with decorating the Christmas tree. "Dad, do you think Sophie will like the twinkling lights?" "I think she'll love it, Princess." "And what about Michelle? What does she like?" David paused. What did Michelle really like, besides taking care of Sophie? He realized that, despite everything that had happened between them, he knew very little about her true likes and interests. "I don't know, Emily. We'll find out today." At 6 p.m., Michelle and Sophie arrived. Sophie was dressed in a new red Christmas dress, and Michelle wore an elegant dark green dress that highlighted her eyes. "David! Emily!" Sophie shouted as soon as the door opened. "I'm so excited I couldn't even have lunch." Emily, initially shy, quickly warmed up to Sophie's contagious energy. "Do you want to see my room? I have some games you might like." As the girls headed to Emily's room, David was left alone with Michelle in the living room. "Thank you for this, David. You have no idea what it means to her." "And to you?" Michelle looked around, taking in the decorations, the nativity scene, the cozy apartment. "For me, it feels like stepping into a dream. I haven't participated in a real Christmas in years." "Why not?" "Because when you're always worried about physical therapy, medications and medical bills, Christmas becomes just another date on the calendar. I never had time to create magic." David served her wine and juice for the kids. During dinner, roasted turkey, French toast, ham, he watched Sophie discover traditions that were second nature to Emily. The toast before dinner, reading the letter to Santa, the custom of opening one present on Christmas Eve and saving the others for the 25th. "In our house, we always open all the presents on Christmas Eve," Emily explained to Sophie. "It's a family tradition." "What a cool tradition," Sophie exclaimed. "Michelle, can we do that too? Have traditions?" Michelle smiled, but David noticed tears in her eyes. "Of course, sweetheart. We can create our own traditions." When it was time for presents, David gave Sophie a new doll and adapted coloring books. For Michelle, he had bought a more personal gift, a blank photo album with the following dedication: "To capture the magical moments that are yet to come." Michelle was silent for a long moment as she read the dedication. "David, this is thank you." Sophie gave Emily a drawing she had made of herself, two girls holding hands under a colorful rainbow. "For my first real friend," Sophie said. Michelle gave David something unexpected, a small handmade wooden sculpture. "I made it myself," she explained, visibly nervous. "It's a building, a bit crooked, but It's to remind you that you build beautiful things. The gift was simple but clearly made with care. David realized it probably hadn't cost much, but it meant so much more than anything expensive she could have bought. It's perfect, Michelle, thank you. After dinner, the kids played in the living room while David and Michelle washed the dishes in the kitchen. David, can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you do this? Why did you invite us knowing everything you know about me? David thought carefully before responding. Because Sophie deserves to have magical moments in her childhood, and because you deserve a night where you don't have to carry the world alone. And you? What do you gain from this? The chance to see Emily learn that family is not just about blood, it's about choosing to take care of each. Michelle stopped washing the plate in her hands and looked at him. David, you know this can't turn into anything, right? Between us? I know. Even if I wanted to, even if you wanted to, it's too complicated. I know. Then why does it seem like you're trying to win me over again? David dried his hands on the towel and turned to her. I'm not trying to win you over, Michelle. I'm trying to show you that you deserve kindness, even with all your complications. Why? Because maybe if you believe you deserve kindness, you'll stop thinking you need to lie to get it. The words hung in the air between them, laden with possibilities and impossibilities in equal measure. Outside, it began to drizzle, a Christmas Eve rain in New York. In the living room, two girls played as if they had been sisters for years. In the kitchen, two wounded adults learned that perhaps redemption was possible, even when everything seemed lost. But David still didn't know that the true test of his convictions was coming. Because the next day, Michelle would receive a call that would change everything again. Christmas dawned with a sun in New York, contrasting with the rain of the eve. David woke up at 7 a.m. with a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, the good anxiety of a Christmas that promised to be special. Emily was already awake, organizing the remaining presents under the tree and humming a Christmas song. Dad, when are Sophie and Michelle going to arrive? Soon, Princess. They're having lunch with us, remember? David had planned a special lunch for the 25th, roasted turkey, salad, traditional desserts. He wanted Sophie to experience all the delights of an American Christmas. At 11 a.m., his phone rang. It was Michelle, and there was something strange in her voice. David, can I talk to you? Sure. Are you guys on your way? That's what I need to talk about. David, we won't be able to have lunch with you today. David's heart sank. What happened? Is Sophie okay? Sophie is fine, but something happened. I need to travel urgently. Travel? Where to? David, it's complicated. Just thank you for yesterday. It was magical, but I can't accept your kindness anymore. Michelle, what's going on? You're scaring me. There was a long pause before she responded. David, remember when I said I would never be able to raise money for Sophie's treatment in the United States? Yes. Someone offered to pay everything. The treatment, the tickets, the accommodation. Everything. David felt his stomach churn. Who? It doesn't matter who. The important thing is that Sophie will be able to get the treatment. Michelle, whose money is this? There is no miracle treatment in the United States. You said it was a lie. There is, David. For Sophie, not for me. Cerebral palsy has experimental treatments there that don't exist here. David tried to process the information. Michelle, how much does this real treatment cost? $120,000. The amount was astronomical. And someone is going to pay that without wanting anything in return? The silence on the other end of the line was eloquent. Michelle, who are you talking to? What kind of deal did you make? David, I can't explain over the phone. Just thank you for everything. Take care of Emily. And if you ever remember us, remember the good times. Michelle, don't hang up. Where are you? We're already at the airport. What airport, Michelle? But the line had already disconnected. David stood frozen in the kitchen, holding the phone in shock. Emily appeared at the door, wearing the new dress she had received the day before. Dad, where's Sophie? They had to travel, Princess. Travel? On Christmas? Yes, to take care of something important. Emily's eyes filled with tears. They didn't like us? David knelt down and hugged his daughter. No, sweetheart. They loved being with us. Sometimes people need to do hard things. But inside, David was in a panic. Something was terribly wrong. Michelle had seemed genuine the night before. Relaxed, happy, grateful. What could have changed? From Saturday to Sunday? Throughout the rest of Christmas Day, David could hardly pay attention to Emily opening presents or the lunch he had prepared with so much care. His mind raced with dark possibilities. On Monday, he couldn't concentrate at work. He called Michelle several times, but the phone was off or out of service. He tried calling the Rehabilitation Institute, but they only said that Sophie had cancelled all appointments indefinitely. On Tuesday, he decided to go personally to the address the investigator had provided, Michelle's real address in the Upper East Side. The building was luxurious, with 24-hour doorman service. David identified himself and asked to speak with Michelle Johnson, apartment 1205. Sir, this apartment has been vacant for 3 days, the doorman informed him. The tenant cancelled the lease and moved out. Did she leave any contact, any information? No, sir. She paid the lease termination fee and left. She took very few things. She seemed a bit desperate. David left the building more confused and worried than when he arrived. Something had forced Michelle to leave New York quickly, taking only the essentials. On Wednesday, he decided to hire the private investigator again. This time, he asked for information about international flights leaving New York in the past few days, entry records in the United States, any trace of Michelle and Sophie. What the discovery left him even more alarmed. Mr. David, said the investigator over the phone on Friday, there is no record of Michelle Johnson or Sophie Johnson on any international flights since the 24th. Neither JFK nor LaGuardia. That's impossible. She said she was at the airport. Sir, there's something else. I checked with contacts in the medical field. There is no experimental treatment for cerebral palsy in the United States that costs $120,000. Existing treatments are either much more expensive or much cheaper. That specific amount does not correspond to any real medical protocol. David felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. So she lied again. Apparently, yes. But, Mr. David, there's something more concerning. I spoke with some contacts at General Hospital. Michelle and Sophie were indeed attending there, but there was an incident 2 weeks ago. What kind of incident? A man showed up looking for them. An older man, well-dressed, looking nervous. He asked a lot of questions about their physical therapy schedules, about their routine. Security became suspicious, and he left. David felt a chill run down his spine. Do you have a description of this man? Approximately 55 years old, graying hair, driving a black Mercedes. He was wearing an expensive suit and a Rolex watch. The description matched the typical profile of men that Michelle had conned before. David began to form a dark theory about what might have happened. Investigator, can you track this man? I can try, but it will take time. Mr. David, may I suggest that you be careful? If this man was looking for Michelle in a suspicious way, and now she has suddenly disappeared, the situation may be more dangerous than it seems. David hung up the phone with a growing sense of despair. What if Michelle hadn't lied this time? What if someone had actually offered money for Sophie's treatment, but in exchange for something she couldn't refuse? On Friday night, while putting Emily to bed, the girl asked a question that broke his heart. Daddy, will Sophie come back one day? I don't know, Princess. I hope so. I miss her. I miss both of them too. That night, David made a decision that would change everything. He couldn't live without knowing what had happened to Michelle and Sophie. Even if it meant uncovering truths he would rather not know. On Saturday morning, he called Sarah for the first time since the Christmas incident. "Sarah, I need your help." "David, are you okay? Your voice sounds strange. Michelle and Sophie have disappeared, and I think they might be in danger." There was a long pause before Sarah responded. "David, tell me everything, from the beginning." And for the first time since he met Michelle, David told absolutely everything to someone. The lies, the truths, the magical Christmas, the sudden disappearance. When he finished, Sarah was silent for a long moment. "David, I will help you find them, not because I approve of this situation, but because no one deserves to just disappear like that." "Thank you, Sarah. But promise me one thing. When we find them, you will accept the truth, whatever it may be." "I promise." What David didn't know was that the truth would be more complex and dangerous than he could imagine, and that finding Michelle and Sophie would only be the beginning of a journey that would test all his limits regarding forgiveness, sacrifice, and the true nature of love. 3,000 miles away, in a small town in Texas, Michelle held a sleeping Sophie in her arms in a simple hotel room, knowing she had made the hardest decision of her life, but also knowing that, for the first time, there was someone in New York who cared enough to look for them. And that, she thought while stroking her sister's hair, might make all the difference in what was to come. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and if you watched until now, comment "I watched until now" and leave your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the final screen. It's very exciting.